UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Nascimento, full card predictions. This card takes place in St. Louis. 12 fights on the card. A lot of actually pretty solid scraps on this card. So just getting right into it, starting at the bottom of the card, making my way to the top. JJ Aldrich and Veronica Hardy. I'm picking Veronica Hardy here. I think Veronica Hardy is just a better striker of the two. I think this is going to be a stand-up fight. I think this fight's going to take place on the feet more often than not. And I think JJ Aldrich is just not that she's a bad, like she's a decent technical striker. I just think Hardy, her movement is going to give Aldrich a lot of problems. Her in and out style, where she's moving around and then kind of blasts in and then kind of moves away, and I think that's going to give Aldrich a lot of trouble in this fight. I like the fact that Veronica Hardy is being trained by her husband Dan Hardy, who is a very very smart MMA mind. I think the game plan of Veronica Hardy will be very good. I believe because obviously the Dan Hardy effect. Dan Hardy actually like just you can just listen to him talk about fighting. He knows his stuff. He's going to know what to do here against JJ Aldrich. I think the similar game plan that she implemented against Jamie Lynn Horth, she can implement against JJ Aldrich. If you look at JJ Aldrich, her last few fights, I mean, she didn't look great in the Nali Yang fight. I know she finished her, but like it's Nali Yang, and I don't think she looked good early in that. Montana De La Rosa, another one where it's like Montana De La Rosa. And I understand on the Hardy side, she has some bad losses on her record, like Bia Malecki 4 years ago and stuff. And then the Jimmy Lynn Horth fight was very close. But I just think Veronica Hardy is improving. I think she's getting better from fight to fight. I think Aldrich, this is a good, proper step up because Aldrich has fought a lot of good competition. I just think Hardy wins this one just by being the faster striker and landing the more powerful shots as well. I'm going to go with 29-28 Veronica Hardy. Maybe she slows down in the third round, but takes the first two. Next, we have Jake Hadley versus Charles Johnson. I was back and forth on this one. It's probably the toughest pick. It's probably the toughest pick for me on the entire card, to be quite honest, but I'm going to go with Charles Johnson for a few reasons. One, the obvious one is he's from St. Louis. That's one that I can just throw out there as, he's a hometown guy. And Jake Hadley coming all the way from, England. And it's not just because of that, obviously. That's not the reason. But Jake Hadley, you look at his fights in the UFC, he's had 4. Fight against Alon Nascimento, just got out grappled the entire fight. Fight against Cody Durden, another one where Durden beat him 30-27, got out grappled in that one as well. And Durden was even landing a lot of solid strikes on Hadley in that fight. The 2 wins he's had are against Malcolm Gordon, hit him with a great body shot right on the liver, put Gordon down, finished him, and then submitted Carlos Candelario. But those wins, honestly, have not really aged well. Candelario hasn't had a win in the UFC, and Malcolm Gordon is, retired now and was also a guy who barely got any wins in the UFC. Now, on the flip side, Charles Johnson, he's lost quite a few fights in the UFC as well. But if you look at Charles Johnson's last 5 in comparison, he beat Jimmy Flick. Jimmy Flick, that's not a great win in my opinion, but still got that one done like he was supposed to. Ode Osborne split. The thing with Johnson is he does have a lot of competitive fights. He does have a lot of close fights, but for Hadley, I think he's kind of reliant on a finish here. I think he's reliant on finding a finish against Charles Johnson. And if he doesn't find that, I think he might slow down as the fight goes on. Charles Johnson definitely does not slow down. Johnson's a guy that picks up the pace as the fight goes on over and over. I think Johnson, especially as the fight wears on and Hadley gets more tired, I think Johnson should start ripping shots to the body because Hadley has that kind of high guard, blocks his head, and tries not to get hit to the head. But if Johnson starts ripping those body shots, whether it be body kicks, body like punches to the body, I think that'll slow down Hadley. And even if he doesn't implement those body shots, I still think Charles Johnson can defeat Hadley as the rounds go on. So I'm going to go with Charles Johnson. I think Hadley also, the fight IQ of both guys can be a bit of a question from time to time. However, Jake Hadley, he's content with being on his back as well. Good grappler as far as he does work from his back. It's not like he's just going to lay there and not do anything. Like he does try to effectively grapple off of his back, which is better than just, accepting guard. But I don't think he's going to submit Charles Johnson. Johnson's never been submitted or knocked out in his career, despite being dropped by Azat Maxim early. He actually came back to win that fight. And that was an undefeated Azat Maxim who had a lot of hype around him, despite the close fight he had with Tyson Nam Maxim did have some hype on him, and he was a heavy favorite against Charles Johnson. So I like Charles Johnson. I like that he is more experienced going the distance in the UFC. Has a lot of close fights, has a lot of competitive fights. But if you're telling me this is in St. Louis and it's going to be a 50-50 fight that could go either way when it hits the cards, I'll take the hometown guy in Charles Johnson to get it done. Next up, we have Trey Waters versus Billy Goff. I like Trey Waters here. Billy Goff's good. I think he has a lot of room for improvement at only 25 years old, so he's going to get better and better from each fight. Trey Waters is pretty young as well, though, 29. And Billy Goff, he's the type of guy where he'll break you if you can't get him out of there. Or he'll walk through the fire and try to hurt you and finish you after he takes some damage himself. The last two fights he's had, the Yusaku Kinoshita fight, he finished Kinoshita. That was a fight where Kinoshita, both guys were landing solid strikes on each other. Billy Goff was landing a lot of low kicks and some punches. Kinoshita was landing some punches as well on Billy Goff, but he ended up finishing him with a great punch to the body, and and Kinoshita just kind of folded right there. And then in the fight against Shimon Smotriski, he head kicked him in the first minute of the fight and almost had Goff out of there. Like, he was on the Contender Series. Goff was very, very close to getting finished in that fight against Shimon there. Like, very close to getting finished. Got head kicked in the first minute. Was hurt badly, recovered quickly, and ended up getting the win. Ended up finishing Shimon. So impressive stuff there from Goff just to be able to overcome that. But against a guy like Trey Waters, Waters is huge for the division. He's a 170. Both guys are 170, obviously, but he's a welterweight that's 6'5" with a 77-inch reach. Billy Goff 5'10" with a 72.5-inch reach. So the reach advantage and the size, the overall size, favors Trey Waters by a lot. Waters is a huge guy for the division, and his only loss of his career was to Gabriel Bonfim. And I just think this is the type of fight where Billy Goff, I don't think he's going to implement a lot of wrestling or be able to, even if he tries to take down Waters. I don't think he's going to have a lot of super effective control time or submission attempts or anything like that. I think Trey Waters, you can look at him getting submitted by Bonfim, but Bonfim's a very high-level grappler. He's a black belt and a very good one at that. So I think ultimately what happens here is Trey Waters just kind of picks him apart and beats Billy Goff by decision. I think Waters will kind of snipe Goff coming in. Goff will try to throw. He'll try to walk through the fire, but he won't be able to knock out Trey Waters, I think. And I think what will happen is Trey Waters just kind of picks him apart and uses his jab a lot and just ends up winning this fight. I'll say 30-27 decision for Trey Waters. Moving along, we have Tabitha Ricci and Tisha Torres, or Tisha Pennington, however you want to say it. I like Tabitha Ricci here, and it's mainly because Tisha had a baby and she's coming back. And I picked Jermaine Durandamy over, I think it was, Norma Dumont. That was the fight where I thought Durandamy was like, I said Durandamy's fought the much better level of competition than Dumont. She's, really good striker, much better than, I said all these things about why I think that Durandamy could win. But at the end of the day, once you have kids and you're getting up there in age, it's tough to make a comeback. You know what I mean? And for Tisha, I think it's something similar. I know Tisha's not super old at all. She's only 34, so she still has time in the sport if she wants to. But I just think, you just had a kid. You had a kid, now you're coming back against someone that's been training the entire time, and Tabitha Ricci, who hasn't had anything, having a kid. I don't know the exact effects of that, but I would imagine it's not positive in terms of coming back and fighting. You know what I mean? I would imagine it's definitely not a positive coming back and fighting after having a kid. And Tisha Torres, she lost her last fight. Her last fight was 2 years ago as well, so a long way off for Tisha. Hasn't fought in 2 years. I think I learned my lesson with Jermaine Durandamy and Norma Dumont, although I do think Durandamy put up a great account of herself. Well, maybe not in the wrestling, but in the striking, I think she put up a good account of herself. But in this fight, I think it's just something where Tisha Torres, she hasn't fought in 2 years. She had a baby, and now she's coming back to fight Tabitha Ricci. And even in the Dern fight, I wasn't super impressed with her in the Dern fight. I mean, Dern won a split decision. And Dern won the second round just by out-grappling Tisha. Basically, no strikes were landed in that round, but Dern had some submission attempts, so they gave her the round. And it's just one of those where Dern hit Tisha clean a few times, especially in round one. She landed a clean right hand. And I think if Tabitha Ricci lands that, she could hurt Tisha Torres. I know Torres isn't someone that she's never been like knocked out or anything like that or submitted. So I would doubt that Tabitha Ricci will be able to knock her out. But I do think Tabitha Ricci could possibly hurt her or could land some strikes that could maybe wobble her. I do think ultimately the fight will go the distance, but I think Tabitha Ricci should win this one. Her last fight was against Lupita Godinez, and she had some success against Lupi. She had some success against Lupi. Um, in the first round, she wobbled Lupi at the end of the round. In round two, well, they both wobbled each other in round one. Lupi got that round, but in round two, Lupi was outstriking her. But in the last, I think, 15 seconds, Ricci landed a great left hand, dropped Lupi, and she dropped her and then started landing ground and pound. If there was more time in the round, I mean, I don't know if she would have finished her, but she dropped her pretty good and then landed the ground and pound after that. So it wasn't a bad showing. I don't think the showing against Lupi was bad. I think Lupi is a very, very good striker, despite her being another person, Lupi, that doesn't have a great fight IQ. But I do think Godinez, if she had a better fight IQ, she'd be one of the top women in the division. So I don't think that loss is really a bad one, despite Lupi losing her last fight to Virna Jandiroba. On the Tisha side, I just think, again, I've said it a few times now, the layoff, her having a baby, I don't think any of that's going to do any wonders for her. And she's a decisionator. If you look, all of her fights, except for two in her entire career, have went the distance. So she has no finishing upside, in my opinion. Tabitha Ricci in this fight probably has more finishing upside, although I do think the fight goes the distance. I'm going to take Tabitha Ricci to win. And another thing I have to mention before I jump off this fight is you have to imagine who do you think the UFC wants to win this fight? Why do you think the UFC made this? The UFC probably made this so they can give Ricci an opponent that they think she can beat, maybe get make a highlight out of. I don't know if she'll be able to knock her out or submit her, but she should win this fight, and this should be a step up for Ricci. Terrence McKinney and Esteban Ribovics is the next fight on the prelims, and I'm going with Esteban Ribovics because McKinney is a round one fighter. McKinney is a round one fighter, and almost all of his wins are in the first round. We all know what Terrence McKinney is. He's a great fighter in the first round. He's very dangerous, and he can knock out or submit a lot of guys early. And if you look through his record, that'll prove it to you. I mean, beat Brennan Maradi in 20 seconds, Mike Breeden in a minute. Those guys aren't great, but Nazim Sadikov, he body triangled him for the entire first round before losing in the second round. Ismail Bonfim was a guy he didn't really have much success against at all. Eric Gonzalez submitted him in 2 minutes. He had a ton of success against Drew Dober in the first minute or two of the fight. He almost had Drew Dober out of there, and then Drew Dober came back and ended up he landed a great knee on McKinney, and then obviously ground and pounded his way to a win. McKinney was also pretty much gassed out, and you could see kind of in the Ismail Bonfim fight, similar thing. McKinney was reaching a lot. He was ducking his head down, and Bonfim timed a perfect flying knee, caught him, and put his lights out. So for SCM, submitted him, beat Matt Farrell in 7 seconds. You look through his record, almost all of his wins are in the first round. A lot of them in the first minute of the first round. Esteban Ribovics, on the other hand, has never been submitted. He's never been knocked out. He has one loss to Loic Radzhabov in his UFC debut, where Radzhabov did land a bunch of takedowns on him. But Esteban Ribovics did use the Kimura. He did use the Kimura multiple times to either stand up or look to use a Kimura sweep. And then against Camuela Kirk in his next fight, he lost round one to Camuela Kirk. Camuela Kirk got to his back, couldn't finish him, and that is the concern if you're on Esteban here, is the fact that he is able to be taken down and he can get his back taken. I think McKinney probably will get to the back early, but Ribovics, he has to know what he's in for here. He's not a guy that looks like he's going to quit easily. He's a guy that against Camuela Kirk, when he had his back taken, he fought off all the submission attempts, things like that. and then ended up beating Camuela Kirk as the rounds went on, ripped shots to the body, really hurt Camuela a few times, and ended up winning the fight by decision. I think this is the case of McKinney getting to his back in round one, and I think McKinney can definitely win round one at a high clip. But I think if the fight starts round two, I think Esteban will take over and finish Terrence McKinney in round two. So I'll call round two Esteban Ribovit's knockout over Terrence McKinney. Headliner of the prelims. This is the fight that everyone's been debating the entire week. Everyone's been back and forth on this one. People have been saying Slava Claus is going to knock him out, or Chase Hooper is going to take him down and out grapple him, make it look easy. I'm on Chase Hooper, guys. I'm on Chase Hooper, and this is one of the fights I've been wanting to talk about for probably one of the fights I've been wanting to talk about the most this week. It's probably honestly this is the fight, one of the fights that I'm the most interested in. Probably top 3 on the entire card. I look at the entire card, and this is one where I'm like, I want to see this fight, and it's because this is an early UFC type fight. This is a fight you would see 20 years ago in the UFC, a pure grappler versus a pure striker. I'm going with Chase Hooper. And it's because you look at Chase Hooper, I know his level of competition has not been on the same level of Slava's, but Slava's been taken down over and over and over again. He's been taken down by everybody. And I understand that, people are saying, oh, Hooper doesn't have the physicality. Yeah, he doesn't have the physicality, but he gets him down once, he's going to get on top of him and elbow his face in. And I think he can definitely do that against Slava here. Slava will be a fish on the mat here if he gets taken down or if the fight hits the mat in general. If Slava's back touches the mat and Hooper gets on top of him, the fight's over, in my opinion. I don't think Slava has any chance in the grappling. I think the grappling is worlds apart. Hooper is a legit black belt, a very, very good grappler, and Slava is a white belt, blue belt at best. He just isn't. He just is not anywhere near the caliber of grappler that Hooper is. Now you can say the opposite. Hooper is nowhere near the striker of Slava Claus. If the fight gets extended on the feet, Slava's going to knock Hooper out because Hooper's striking is poor. And I agree with that. I don't think Hooper's striking is very good. However, in a fight where it's a grappler versus a striker, Hooper's much younger, 24 to 32, so Hooper's going to be the one that's making more improvements at a faster rate. I like Hooper here. I really do. I think his grappling is just going to be too much for Slava. I think Hooper might have to tank a few shots. I know it's going to, there's going to be a worry early if Slava hits Hooper clean on the chin, but if Hooper can absorb a few punches and get to the body lock or somehow drag him to the mat, I think the fight's his to lose. So I like Hooper in this one. Slava Claus, he got taken down 4 times by Sadikov. He got taken down. Mashate didn't really attempt many takedowns at all. Mike Davis, he got taken down 10 times. Got taken down by Diakese, I think, like 13 times. Dakota Bush took him down 3 times, 2 or 3 times in that one. Who else? Chris Duncan was able to take him down twice. And I know you can say he won those fights. He knocked out Mashate, he beat Dakota Bush, he beat Chris Duncan, but those guys are nowhere near the level of grappler that Hooper is. They're obviously better strikers than Hooper is, clearly, but which is why it's dangerous on the feet, but they're not the same level of grappler. And Chris Duncan, for example, Chris Duncan's not a wrestler. He can wrestle, but he's not a wrestler it's not like he's a D1 wrestler or anything like that. I don't think you need to be a D1 wrestler to take down Slava. So give me Chase Hooper. I've seen a lot of love on both sides. I like Chase Hooper, though, to get it done. I think also if the fight gets extended, on the feet, I would be very worried. But if the fight gets into round 2, 3, I think Hooper will be the one that has better cardio. I think he'll be able to implement his game plan better as the fight wears on if it does get that far. So give me Chase Hooper. Moving along, we are now on the main card already. This is interesting. Waldo Cortez Acosta versus Robelis Despain. Cortez Acosta and Robelis Despain. I'm going to reluctantly pick Robelis Despain, although he hasn't been out of the first round in any fight of his career. So I think there's a certain time I'm going to fade Despain, but I don't think it's going to be now. I think this fight is probably going to play out on the feet. I don't think Waldo is going to shoot takedowns. I think Waldo's a boxer himself. Waldo's a boxer. Rubelas Spain is a taekwondo, comes from a taekwondo background and was a medalist. I believe was a bronze medalist in taekwondo in the Olympics. And with Despain, I just think it's a matter of Despain. His kicks are very good. He doesn't really throw like leg kicks per se, or at least he hasn't shown that ability. But what he has shown is he can throw high kicks very well, and his hands are dynamite. If he hits you once, you're probably going to go to sleep. I think that's what's going to happen here to Waldo. I think Waldo won't be able to eat shots from Despain. I think Despain hits way too hard for him. I think round one, he's going to try to strike with him, and what's going to happen is he's going to strike with him and he's going to get knocked out, and it's going to be another highlight reel KO for Rubelas Despain. If the fight gets past the first round, if it gets past the first few minutes, I would be very worried if you're on the Despain side, especially if you bet him at this price. I think this price is ridiculous. I think you can't, you know, at minus 250, you're basically saying, I guarantee Rubelas wins in the first round by knockout. That's basically what you're saying if you're taking Rubelas at minus 250, because he's never been past the first round. So you can't be confident that he's going to, if the fight gets into the second and third round, you can't be confident that he's going to win those exchanges or win the fight in those rounds. But in the first round, you can be confident that he can win because he's shown the ability that he can knock guys out with one punch. He has the death touch, and Waldo's been knocked out before. Not in MMA, but he has been knocked out in boxing twice, once in the first round, once in the fourth round. And his overall level of competition for Despain has not been very good. But for Waldo, he didn't look great, in my opinion, against the 44-year-old Andrei Arlovsky. Lucas Bresky, he beat him, but it's Lucas Bresky. It's not really a super impressive win, in my opinion. Lost to Marcos Rogério de Lima, who chewed up his legs completely, had probably landed 30 leg kicks on him. Beat Chase Sherman, Jared Vandera. So you look through and it's like he's beaten some guys, but Waldo's strength of schedule, for anyone that says Rubelas Spain hasn't fought anyone, he hasn't fought anybody, but Waldo Cortez Acosta, I mean, it's not like he's fighting the very best of the division. He's not like he's fighting the upper echelon of guys. So I'm going to go with Rubelas Spain, round one knockout. Definitely not a guarantee, but I do think he'll be able to catch Waldo and put him out. So that is what I think will happen there to open up the main card. And you got to wonder why they made this fight. They probably think, someone's getting knocked out here, and they probably think Rubelas is knocking out Waldo. Alex Caceres and Sean Woodson in our next fight on the main card. I think this is a showcase fight for Sean Woodson. I think he gets it done by decision. I think he will just outpoint Alex Caceres. Caceres is pretty durable. He's been submitted a bunch of times, but he hasn't really been knocked out much, and he's been in the UFC forever. So that's kind of why his record is 21-14, just because almost all of his fights have been at the UFC level against good competition. The level of competition for Woodson overall has not been the same as Caceres, because Caceres has fought some of the better guys throughout his career. But Caceres is he's a bit of a guy. I don't want to compare him to Michael Johnson, because I feel like he's, I'll kind of compare him to Michael Johnson in the fact that, both guys have the ability to, on their best day, they can, win a lot of fights, but on their worst day, they can also lose to just about anybody. And I think that's somewhat similar of Caceres. Now, again, they're not the exact same, prototype. They're not the same type of fighter, but I think for Sean Woodson here, he's never lost a decision. I'll say that, first of all. 11-1, 11-1-1, the one draw to Luis Saldana. Where is it? 7-0. He's 7-0 in fights that went the distance. So Woodson is a very good minute winner. He wins a lot of fights that he's won every fight that's hit the cards in his career, except for the one draw he had. So he never lost a decision. Whereas Alex Caceres, he has lost plenty of them, and to some guys on 10-6 in fights that went the distance. Now, some of those losses, Giga Chikadze, Sadiq Youssef, you go down, but then you look at like Guan Wang, who you look into that and you're like, 23-1. You look through his record, you're like, wait a minute, this guy fought nobodies in China. So it's like, that's probably not the best loss to have. Overall, though, Caceres, bit of an awkward striker, is a solid grappler, but I don't think this fight's going to play out in the grappling. I think it's going to play out on the feet. It's another case of it could be competitive. I do think Sean will showcase his striking, though. He uses his length very well. Him being a 6'2" with a 78-inch reach featherweight, which is insane. I don't know how he makes the weight. I don't know how someone that's 6'2" with a 78-inch reach can make featherweight. Alex Caceres is not a small feather. He's 5'10" with a 73.5-inch reach. It's not like he's a small guy. And Sean Woodson is just, it's I don't know how he cuts that much weight or how he makes the weight in general. He does have a very like small kind of like a slim type of build, but still, it's like it's crazy that he can do that. But I think Woodson gets it done. I think he just picks apart Caceres on the outside, and I think that's how he ends up winning this fight. I'll go by decision. Fight's also in St. Louis. Another thing you got to mention: if it is a close fight, they'll probably give it to Woodson. So give me Sean Woodson to get it done there. 4 fights to go on the main card. There are some solid scraps here. This one I think will be Carlos Diego Ferreira versus Mateusz Rebecki. I think Rebecki, however you want to say it, I think Rebecki gets it done. I think Rebecki is a very good prospect in the lightweight division. I know he hasn't fought the level of competition, and I know I've said this in a few different fights. I said it in the Caceres fight. I'll say it in this fight. The level of competition is not the same with some of these guys, but at the end of the day, Carlos Diego Ferreira is 39 years old. His last fight against Michael Johnson, he landed that overhand right, put Michael Johnson out cold. That was one of the most brutal knockouts of the entire year. Johnson was just flat out cold. But it's Michael Johnson. Michael Johnson is a guy who's I'm not just saying this to be disrespectful. He is by definition a 50-50 fighter. So he has almost the exact amount of losses as he has wins. So just keep that in mind when you're looking at the Michael Johnson fight. And Michael Johnson didn't look like he wasn't like getting beat in that fight. Like the striking numbers were almost identical up until the knockout. So it's like it was a very competitive fight. If the fight would have went the distance and Michael Johnson wouldn't have been knocked out with that overhand, who knows what would have happened? Who knows if Michael Johnson would have won the fight? I think Mateusz Rebecki at this point, he's 31 years old. It's now or never for him in the lightweight division. I think it's his time to, you want to become a star and, get to the highest level, you got to start picking up these wins against guys like Carlos Diego Ferreira and then move on and maybe take another leap and then try to get closer to that top 15. Carlos Diego Ferreira also, before the Michael Johnson fight, hadn't fought in 2.5 years where he got injured. He got injured in the Gamrot fight. So a lot of things on the side of Rebecki here. Rebecki, he beat Roosevelt Roberts, submitted him in the first round, beat Loic Radzhabov, chewed up his leg badly. The leg kicks were getting to Loic terribly. Like you could tell his leg was beat up. He didn't know how to deal with the leg kicks. And then Rebecki, once Radzhabov started trying to, I guess, address those leg kicks, Rebecki started putting the hands on him as well. So great win there against Radzhabov. And then his other UFC fight was against Nick Fiore, where he dominated that fight. Should have finished Nick Fiore, but still dominated the fight en route to a decision win. I think Rebecki will find a finish here against Carlos Diego Ferreira. I just think Carlos Diego Ferreira is just getting up there in age. I think he's getting up there in age. I don't think before the knockout against Michael Johnson, it wasn't like he was dominating the fight. I think the age will catch up to him. He'll start to slow down, and Rebecki will find a finish. Rebecki will walk him down. That's kind of what he does to all of his opponents, just walks him down, uses his physicality to his advantage. I think he will use his physicality in this fight. Will probably land some takedowns here. Has to watch out, for the grappling threat. But I think Rebecki will be fine here. I think he'll be fine, and I think he'll find a finish. So give me Mateusz Rebecki. He's also minus 500, so that's not really a hot take by any means. Featured fight of the night, we have Alonzo Menifield versus Carlos Ulberg. The city kickboxing prospect of Ulberg versus another Fortis MMA fighter in Alonzo Menifield. So is this back-to-back Fortis MMA fighters? Yeah. Carlos Diego, yeah. So back-to-back Fortis MMA fighters. Interesting. I am going to go with Carlos Ulberg to beat Alonzo Menifield, I think Olberg is just a better technical striker, just a better striker overall. I think Alonzo Menifield is dangerous. I'll say that. He's very dangerous. Atomic Alonzo Menifield. His fights, though, I mean, the William Knight, I get it. It was in 2021, but losing to William Knight is just like William Knight's terrible. I don't know how you lose to William Knight. It's just not a good look. We've seen William Knight in his last fight. I think it was what was it, Marcin Prachnio fight where he just refused to throw a punch or do anything. It's just that lost his age terribly. Got knocked out with the left hook by Oben St. Preux, which I'll mention the number one path to victory for Carlos Ulberg, almost all of his wins in the UFC, or at least a few of them, two in a row. Ihor Butaria, Nikolai Negumereanu, and then even on the Contender Series against Bruno Oliveira, this guy has a nasty left hook. This guy, if he hits you with that left hook, he can knock you out. Now, obviously, his left hook isn't like Pereira level. Of course, Pereira is a different type of striker, a different type of power. But if Ulberg lands that left hook on Menifield, I think he puts him out here. I think he puts him out. I think he hurts him badly. If he lands that, I think he probably will. He'll probably time that and land that. Menifield does throw with power, but sometimes he is open. Sometimes he does throw with reckless abandonment and leave himself open for that kind of counter shot, where Ulberg will be looking for that throughout the fight. Um, Menifield, both guys have been on a win streak in their last few. For Menifield, though, after the William Knight fight, he beat the biggest fraud in UFC history, and I'm not joking when I say that. Askar Nazarov should never have even been in the UFC. Go look up the story of Askar. If you guys aren't aware of what happened with Askar, if you guys aren't aware of how much of a fraud he is, just go look him up. Go look him up and look up Askar Nazarov fake record. This guy faked his record in the past. Just go look it up, and you'll see what I'm talking about. So that win, I don't even count Askar as a real win, honestly. Misha Serkinov beat him in the first round, solid. Jimmy Crute, the fact that Jimmy Crute went the distance with Alonzo Menifield, the fact that Menifield couldn't get him out of there in their first fight was very not a good look. I thought he should have been able to finish him. I know he finished him in the rematch, but I think he should have got Crute out of there in the first fight. And then Dustin Jacoby was another win that Menifield had. However, I want to address the Jacoby fight. Dustin Jacoby was outlanding Menifield on the numbers. Jacoby was winning the fight, but he kept getting rocked. Usually at the end of the round or sometime in the round, Menifield would clip him and hurt him, and that was what lost Jacoby the fight. If Jacoby didn't get rocked, if he didn't get hurt bad multiple times by Menifield, he would have won that fight. And I know there's a bunch of what ifs, there's a bunch of coulda, woulda, shoulda, but you got to take all this into account when I'm picking a fight like this. Good striker, Carlos Ulberg from City Kickboxing, training with Izzy and all those guys, versus Alonzo Menifield, who does leave himself open, does have a lot of power, has a ton of power, but leaves himself open in a lot of fights. I'm going to go with Carlos Ulberg to get it done. I don't think the grappling will play a major factor in this fight in general either. Co-main event is Joaquin Buckley versus Nursultan Ruzaboyev. Another St. Louis guy, and I want to pick him, but I'm not going to. Actually, no, I really don't want to pick him after the shit talk that he's been saying all week. I'm going with Nursultan Ruzaboyev. It's not just because of the shit talk, but there's a few reasons why I like Nursultan. If the fight gets extended into the second and third round, I'd be very cautious about picking Nursultan, or especially betting on him for those that are taking the plus 115 shot on Nursultan. Most of his fights end in the first round. However, Joaquin Buckley, let's look at Buckley's weakness. What is Buckley's weakness, you wonder? Well, his weakness is his chin. 4 losses by knockout. And you look and it's not like he's getting knocked out. Now, some of his opponents, the Chris Curtis fight, for example, he got knocked out by Chris Curtis, who does hit very hard, but Jackie Gosh, way long ago in Bellator, knocked him out in the first round. Kevin Holland knocked him out in round 3. Alessio Di Chirico knocked him out with a head kick. Lost to Chris Curtis. lost this decision to Nasruddin Imavov. So this guy, Buckley, his chin is a major, major concern. And Nursultan Ruzaboyev, what does he do? Throws great straight punches down the middle. And if he hits you with one of those like straight right hands, I think if he hits Buckley with a straight right hand, he's going to knock him out. I seriously think that he's dropping down to 170, which could deplete him quite a bit. But Nursultan has fought at 170 in the past, and he's a huge guy, 6'5" for the division of welterweight. Joaquin Buckley only being 5'10". I think he's probably smaller than that. I think the size advantage is clear for Nursultan, size and reach advantage. I think Nursultan will be able to get to the target faster just because he has very long arms, and he does have a lot of power. Excuse me, does have a lot of power. I think he'll be able to get to Buckley. Now, another thing, Nursultan, almost all of his fights end inside the distance. If the fight goes to decision, Buckley's going to win. I just want to say that right away. If the fight goes all 3 rounds and Nursultan can't find a way to finish him, I think Buckley will win. However, Nursultan is a guy who almost all of his fights end inside the distance, and he wins most of them that end inside the distance. Buckley's been knocked out too many times for my liking, and even his wins at 170, Andre Fiallo, you can look at Nursultan's wins and say, well, I mean, Bruno Ferreira was 10-0, and then Cedricus Dumas, those wins aren't the greatest ever, but Joaquin Buckley at 170, Andre Fiallo. Andre Fiallo is a flake. Andre Fiallo is a complete flake, and it is what it is. He beat Alex Morono as well. Alex Morono is a good fighter, but Alex Morono is not a guy that is knocking anybody out. Alex Morono is just not that. Well, not that he can't knock anybody out, but Alex Morono, that's not what he's known for. He's not known for knocking guys out. He's not known for his power. He's not known for his explosiveness. I think Nursultan is much more known for his power, explosiveness, ability, finishing ability, and the finishing upside overall. And then the Vicente Luque fight, I was actually at that card. Vicente Luque, he just quit, and it's sad to see, but Luque's done in my opinion. I don't think Luque will ever get to that. Will ever get to the top of the division anymore. I think he's the downfall of Luque. I think it's more so just Luque being done rather than Buckley having a great win. And I know it's discrediting Buckley, but is it a lie? Is it a lie that Luque just gave up in that fight? He took a few shots and he took them well. It's not like he was getting like wobbled all over the place and dropped, but he decided to pull guard, and once he pulled guard, he just shelled up and quit. That's why Buckley won the fight. That's why Joaquin Buckley is ranked at welterweight, because Luque quit. Nursultan Ruzaboyev, I don't expect him to quit here. He's also training with a really good team. He's training with the Philly guys, Sean Brady, Joe Pfeiffer, all of them. His grappling will be on point here. I think he has a grappling advantage, and I think he has the power advantage compared to the weak chin of Buckley. So give me Nursultan Ruzaboyev. If the fight gets into rounds 2 and 3, I would be very worried, and you should be as well if you're on Nursultan. But in round 1, he has all the upside to find a finish on someone like Buckley, who's been knocked out 4 times in his career. And lastly, main event of the evening is Derek Lewis versus Rodrigo Nascimento. I think this is a fight for Derek Lewis to get back on track. I think Derek Lewis, he is 39 to the 31-year-old Nascimento, but I just don't see how Lewis loses this fight. You can't tell me that he's not going to find the KO here. I just think he has the most knockout wins. It might be in UFC history. If I'm not mistaken, Derek Lewis has the most knockout wins in UFC history. And Rodrigo Nascimento, on the other hand, and by the way, I know Derek Lewis, he hasn't won a lot in his last few fights, but if you look at those fights, Tai Tuivasa, a brawler who hits really hard, Sergey Pavlovich, another guy who hits incredibly hard and is very good, Sergey Spivak, a wrestler, took him down, submitted him. Lewis just kind of, you could tell his head wasn't really in it there. Just not a good look in general. Marcos Rogério de Lima hit him with a flying knee and finished him. And then Jailton Almeida Jailton Almeida is a dominating grappler who dominated Curtis Blades in the first round before losing in the second round, but Almeida's legit, so no shame in a lot of those losses. For Nascimento, though, let's look at his record. 11-1. You look and you're like, wow, 11-1, Nascimento. He must be, beating a lot of these guys. And you're like, oh, wait, Dontel Mays, Aware Latifi by split, Tanner Bozer by split. Um, the Alain Badeau fight, which was ruled a no contest because, where is it? Because he tested positive for PEDs. So that fight did not count for him. Lost to Chris Daukaus. I mean, got knocked out in 45 seconds by Chris Daukaus. I think that's all we need to know about this fight is the fact that Rodrigo Nascimento got finished in under a minute by Chris Daukaus, and now you're fighting a guy who hits twice as hard, maybe 3 times as hard in Derek Lewis. And if Lewis hits you once, you're going to sleep. Nascimento is not going to be able to last 25 minutes um, without Derek Lewis landing a bomb right on the chin. So give me Derek Lewis. Pretty much all of his wins are by knockout. So Derek Lewis, round one knockout. I just don't think Nascimento. If Lewis just bull rushes him and just starts swinging, heavily, I don't think Nascimento has any chance. I really don't. I just think he gets knocked out. If Chris Daukaus can knock you out in a minute, why can't Derek Lewis? So that's how I see this fight playing out. And there it is. UFC Fight Night, Lewis versus Nascimento, full card predictions. Few good fights on the card. Solid card overall. I know some people have been complaining about it. Don't really understand the complaints. I think it's for a fight night card. I think it's actually pretty solid. Even Derek Lewis in the main event. I think we will see a throwback Derek Lewis style knockout. So thank you guys very much for watching. And as always, I will see you in the next one.